I worked briefly as a psych tech a few years ago. The clinic was fine, not great, not terrible. Most of us were young, early in our careers, and honestly just trying to build our resumes before moving on. I never loved how the clinic worked though. It felt more like a subscription service than actual mental health care. 2 sessions a month, bundle packages, renew forever. Everyone pretended that was normal. One of the nurses there was Jenny. She was friendly, a little quiet, but everyone liked her. I never had a real reason to think anything strange about her. One afternoon, she and I left work a bit early to go to Marshall's and buy holiday decorations. She offered to drive, since I didn't have a car at the time. The plan was simple: shop, then she dropped me off at home. While we were browsing, I remembered I still had a work call to make. My manager said I could do it from home through the clinic's app, so I figured I'd just step outside and do it from Jenny's car. The checkout line was huge anyway, so Jenny handed me her keys and stayed inside. When I got to the car, I sat in the driver's seat and started the call. Halfway through, I realized I needed to take notes, and stupidly forgot I wasn't at work, where everything was already organized for me. I hesitated, then reached into the center console to look for a pen or paper. I knew I shouldn't have, boundaries and all that, but I genuinely thought I'd just scribble a few notes and apologize later. Inside the console, there was a small notebook. I figured I'd just flip to the last page, write my notes, and explain it to her later. But the moment I opened the notebook, I froze. The first page had a full name I recognized, a patient, their address, and a little description of their house. I blinked and turned the page. Another name, another exact address. Notes about their house, details you wouldn't know unless you had actually stood in front of it. I kept flipping page after page. Every patient in our clinic. Dozens. All with their addresses. Notes about whose curtains were always drawn, who had a side gate, who lived alone. My heart started racing. I knew immediately this notebook shouldn't exist. No nurse should ever have this. Not in her car. Not in her handwriting. I was about to close the notebook when something hits me like a punch. My own name. My own address. Written exactly the way it was in my employee file. Something only HR should see. And under it, a note. Second floor apartment, walks home after 6 p.m., no car, usually alone. My stomach dropped. I turned the page so fast I nearly ripped it. There was another note about me. Lights off most nights. Bedroom window faces the street. I felt every hair on my arms rise. I couldn't breathe. Jenny had never been to my place. She shouldn't have known where I lived. She shouldn't have known what floor I was on. She definitely shouldn't have known which window was my bedroom. And the worst part, she never worked with me long enough to know my schedule. She had been watching me closely. I shoved the notebook back exactly where it was, closed the console, and forced myself to finish my work call while my hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the phone. When Jenny finally came back to the car with her shopping bags, she smiled and said, "Everything's okay?" I nodded. I had to. Because suddenly I was trapped in her car. She was the one driving me home, and she knew exactly where I lived. The entire ride, I stared out the window and pretended to scroll my phone. I didn't say a word, neither she did. But one point, she glanced at me and gave this tiny little smile, like she knew something I didn't. When we pulled up to my building, she said, "You should get some curtains for that window. Anyone can see in." I swear, my blood turned to ice. I thanked her, I got out, I locked my door the second I stepped inside, and I never went anywhere with her again. I never told anyone at the clinic, and to this day, I still don't know whether she stopped watching me or whether she simply got better at hiding it. In high school, I had a stalker. Here is the story. I'll try to keep it concise, but there is a lot of information for sure. I was 16 and we met on Facebook. He went to a high school nearby and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating. First time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest and wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag 1. And since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house or around town at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed his family was pretty odd. One day we were sitting in his bedroom and I saw his father looking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out and his dad ran off. Stalker guy told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us, so this wasn't the first time. I went to leave and his mom was doing crack in the kitchen, so I decided it was time to break up. This is when it got bad. He started crying and told me that he is in cancer treatment and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him we could be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never went to class. He would just stand outside of my classroom looking inside until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 50 foot behind me to my next period and stand outside the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him. He was 6 foot 4 inches and a heavy-set guy, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me, despite living across town, and walk 10 to 15 foot behind me all the way to my house. He would stand outside just staring up at the window until around the time my parents got home, and then he would just leave. Finally, I told him firmly to leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends or acquaintances and to forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me. And the other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one and leave more messages on that. I woke up one day to see that overnight. He left me one of those dancing, singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head and the knife was still sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of. And I noticed there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice singing eerily, "I'm going to have you forever. I'm never going to let you be." I was done at this point and told my parents, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day he ran at me like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug, it was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5 feet 1 inch and about 90 pounds at the time, and he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried and he started crying too, before running off. He left me a voicemail apologizing in song. This one night is the night I will never forget, and it's the reason we got a restraining order and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason, just was fully awake. I got up to go to my kitchen to get a glass of water to relax. And in the reflection on my fridge, I saw movement in my backyard. I couldn't see well cause it was so dark outside and so light inside. So I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of 6 feet 4 inch man standing just outside the door. Stalker guy was in my backyard, under my room at 3 a.m. He was just staring at me. I yelled and my parents got up, but he was gone by the time my dad went outside. There is a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way to the ground, so it's possible he could have been on top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. We got a restraining order granted shortly after that, and Stalker guy dropped out of school. I haven't seen him since in person, but every 6 months he makes a new Facebook and tries to friend request me. I just block it and report it every time. Scary stuff. I never thought much about neighbors. I'm the kind of person who minds my own business, says hello in the hallway, and that's it. But in 2021, when I was 27 and living in Richmond, Virginia, I learned the hard way that some people pay much closer attention than you had ever imagined. Back then, I had just moved into a small townhouse complex near West Broad Street. It wasn't the nicest area, but the rent was decent, and the place was quiet. Most of the residents were older, retired couples, widows, people who kept it to themselves. I liked that. My unit was number 14B, right between Mrs. Perkins, a sweet 68-year-old who begged too much, and a guy I rarely saw in 14A. His name was Mark, mid-30s, average height, always wore plain clothes, gray tees, jeans, nothing memorable. I barely heard him through the walls, and honestly, I was grateful for that. The first odd thing happened about 3 weeks after I moved in. One evening around 6:30, I walked outside to take the trash out. Mark happened to be locking his car, and without even saying hello, he casually said, "Late shift again?" I froze. I had never told him my work schedule. "Ah, yeah," I said slowly. "Every other week." He nodded, almost like he was confirming something he already knew. I shrugged it off. Maybe Mrs. Perkins mentioned it. She talked a lot. But then it happened again. A few days later, I left for work at 1:40 p.m. as usual. Mark was sitting on his front step, tying his shoes. I tried to walk past without small talk, but he said, "You are running behind today." I stopped in my tracks. "How do you know what time I normally leave?" I asked. He just smiled in a weird, tight-lipped way. "You are pretty consistent. That's all." I laughed awkwardly and got in my car. But something about the tone bothered me. Not friendly, not teasing. At first I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he just noticed patterns over the weeks. But then small things started adding up. 2 weeks later, I came home around 11 p.m. after grabbing dinner with a coworker. I walked into my living room, but there was something strange. The lamp near the window was on, which it doesn't make sense. I never left it on. I'm obsessive about turning off lights before leaving. I checked every room. Nothing was missing. No signs of forced entry. Doors were still locked. I convinced myself I must have forgotten. People make mistakes. That night I stayed on edge. I had installed a cheap motion-activated camera above my living room window, mostly for peace of mind. The first night, it didn't pick up anything. Maybe I was overreacting. But the second night, it recorded everything. At 2:16 a.m., The camera picked up motion. A figure approached my front door. It was Mark. He walked right up like he owned the place, pressed his ear against the door, stayed there for a full 10 seconds. Then he crouched down, peering under the tiny gap at the bottom, as if checking for any sign of movement inside. After that, he slowly walked to my window. His shoulder almost touched the glass. I could see the silhouette of his head turning slightly, scanning for something. He lingered there for nearly a minute before calmly walking back to his own unit. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, I went straight to the leasing office, showing them the footage. Their reaction changed immediately. They promised a formal warning and told me I could break my lease without penalty if I wanted to move. I didn't wait. I begged the same day, but even then, the creepiness didn't end. As I made my final trip to the car, Mark was standing outside his door holding a cup of coffee, watching. As I locked the trunk, he said in a quiet, almost disappointed voice, "You are really leaving?" I didn't answer. He took a sip of his coffee, stared at me for a long moment, then added, "You were easy to keep track of." I got in my car so fast, I nearly slammed my fingers in the door. I moved across the city the next morning, changed my routine, changed everything. Even now, years later, I still think about that line. You were easy to keep track of. Because it means he wasn't guessing my schedule. He wasn't casually observing. He was studying me. And I'll never know for how long.